Hey there. Great movie. Have you seen this one? Holy shit. Hey there, I'm Dan, the self-proclaimed Lonely Rocker. Thank you so much for joining me today. So, I inadvertently got myself into the amps versus modeler war in my last video, when in fact, that's not what the video was about. I was specifically talking about amps, or amp manufacturers, that are experimenting with embedding digital components inside of a tube amp. Now, I get it why they're doing that, because we are in the digital age, and amp manufacturers are looking for different ways to compete with modelers. But an amp is never going to be a modeler, and a modeler is never going to be an amplifier. It's my opinion, and I think it's supported by a lot of data, that digital products are not designed necessarily to last forever. I mean, nothing is forever, but a good, well-built tube amp can last for a very, very long time, especially ones that are built with generally available components. Yes, there are exceptions to the rule, but digital products generally are proprietary, and often they've got versions or firmware updates, things like that, so they just don't last forever. So what happens with a tube amplifier that has a digital component, let's say 10, 15, 20 years from now? If you collect amps and you'd like your amps to last for a long time, I think it's something to think about. Anyways, it spawned a whole discussion that really got into the whole amp versus modelers thing, and you know what? It's a fun discussion. So I've got a mission if you choose to accept it. What I did is I waded into the comments because you guys are pretty passionate about what you believe in. I think that's a trait of the average guitar player. We're pretty passionate about the gear that we own, and we want to stand up for it for whatever reason. But there's a lot of great discussion that came out of that video, and I'm going to share some of that with you. So I've pulled out comments from Team Amp and from Team Modeler, and I pitch you against each other and see if you can prove your case. And we're going to dive into those. And I want you to participate in this conversation because there's a lot more that can be said about it. So definitely let me know your thoughts in the comments. And while you're down there, I'm really into the rigs because there's so many different combinations of technology, whether it's, more vintage style, more modern modeler style. Some people are cross-pollinating between the two. There's some really cool solutions out there, and I want to hear from you. So definitely let me know about your rigs in the comments as we enter the fray of the amp versus modeler war.
Those digital components in the newer tube digital amps are not going to be local shop available components.
Dude, it's not about replacement parts. It's not about getting the latest thing. It's about sounding good at low volume. How much did that house cost you? Okay, that's the price of owning a JCM 900. Gotta have a place to turn it up. If Marshall came out with an amp that sounded great at low volume, I'd buy it in a heartbeat. But they didn't.
I don't like this hybridization trend of combining digital tech with tube amps, mainly from a maintenance perspective. I want to keep my tube amps simple so the repairs and maintenance are less expensive.
That growing segment of the market is very willing to sacrifice the feel of a tube amp, especially because they may never actually fully experience it, even if they own the amp, not being able to crank it on stage, etc. Add to all that the cost and maintenance of tube amps, availability of parts, the fear of something happening to your expensive treasure, and it's a tough sell for a growing number of players.
Sorry, but convenience over tone makes you a lazy musician.
I kind of agree with that guy because I think the benefits of convenience ends when it starts to make you lazy. In the old days, learning how to find a tone, sometimes with bad equipment, there was something to be learned from that. And today you can just pick a preset and go. But that being said, you can't be critical of someone who's taking advantage of modern technology that's creating opportunities for them. But we're kind of looking at it from two different sides here. People who want to take advantage of digital solutions, it's because it's a solution for them. And I don't think we can be critical of that. On the other hand, I think there is the potential to get lazy, and it's something we need to be careful about. I call it the preset generation because sometimes it might be healthy to venture out and maybe learn how to create some of those tones for yourself.
I gave up on tube amps years ago. Expensive, heavy, unreliable, one-trick ponies.
My Pod Go sounds like ass, and trying an FM9 is impossible. Guess I'll stick to my 6505 Plus and 5153 6L6 stealth heads and Mesa caps.
Modern tube amps, even without embedded digital technology, are not made as good as your old Marshall is. Hence, even simple but modern tube amps are probably never going to be lifelong investments.
I know in 10 years I will still have my Marshall heads. I won't have a quad Cortex as good as it is.
I don't think about resale value as another reason why modelers suck.
Another good point. We'll give one for the modeler team. We can't necessarily judge value based on maybe traditional values, right? I mean, an amplifier is a collector's item for some people, and for other people, it's just a tool. And I think we have to be wary of that. Now, if you notice, if you look at those comments carefully, it almost seems like the people who are arguing their point haven't really spent a lot of time in the other camp. And this is something that we do have to be mindful of when we're looking to get opinions on what gear is best for us, because guitar players are very passionate about the things that they own. Someone who's only used a modeler might feel, their back up against the wall when someone's critical of modeling technology because they've grown up on that and they have an emotional attachment to it. Same thing with amp guys. So that's something to be aware of anytime you're looking to get some opinions, especially online.
End-of-life factor aside, having products that are based on digital platforms will inevitably enable companies to get greedy and lock features behind subscription models, which forces you to keep spending, whereas a real amp keeps working no matter what.
It sort of depends on if you have a collector mentality or a toolkit mentality. I'm not worried about a $1,900 FM9 having an end of life if it does exponentially more for my playing than a crusty old Marshall tube amp.
2 words: planned obsolescence.
Digital modelers are the greatest thing for many gigging musicians and sound engineers. Usually the best sounding bands I see live are the ones who use modelers with in-ears for less on-stage noise.
Some very key points there, because perception of value is different for different people. Now, I get it. With modeling technology, artists who had to travel around the country with big rigs like this, it's very expensive, shipping costs, trucking costs, things like that. And today you can walk in with a floorboard and be done. You're going to have those cost savings right up front. So all the money that you would have spent on shipping your amps around, well, you can keep that in your pocket. That being said, the modeler might not last forever and you're going to have to reinvest every few years, especially if you're a professional and want current tools. Whereas amplifiers, your perception that they have value and something that you could resell over time. It's an important distinction. I get it in the digital world, plug-in software, things like that. There's a recurring revenue model. They found a way to make money and they're going to get you to upgrade and buy the latest and greatest version. So it's a very, very different mentality, but that perception of value is going to be very different on either side.
Indeed, it is rare that digital products are still considered valuable after many, many years. So many are excited about the FM9, but I'm pretty sure it will be a laughable product in 20 years, much like the Line 6 Pod is considered laughable.
The reason more and more gravitate to digital modelers is consistency. Amps are heavy and bulky, you have to set up extra gear to record them. Modelers make all of that less of a pain.
Yeah, as good as digital modeling amps are today, they are basically disposable. I like keeping a good old tube amp around for dependability and longevity, but I'll often utilize digital stuff for convenience.
For me, it's simple economics. I can get a Kemper, FM9, and quad Cortex for under $2,000. If I just want 2 valve amps like a Fender Twin Reverb, $1,999, and a Soldano SLO 100 Super Lead, $3,999, I could buy that quad Cortex 4 times.
Again, just more examples of where different people perceive the value to be and are willing to spend accordingly, and how different it can be for someone who grew up using amps versus someone who's perhaps more used to modelers.
It is alarming how software is temporary, and I don't think we realize the extent of it yet. App-enabled gadgets are pretty cool now, but it will become a nightmare.
If amp companies stop riding on past glory and bring something to the table to compete, that'd be great.
The goal these days is simply to make a product life cycle very short. You need to love the product and want to buy a new version every 1 to 2 years.
My Helix LT that I bought in 2017 new sells used for more than I paid new. At least for now, anyway.
As much as digital products can provide financial convenience upfront, we have to be careful about attaching too much value to them in the long run. That's a mistake I think you'll make. Enjoying the savings in the short run and the conveniences that digital provides, but falsely attaching a monetary value to something that likely won't be in the future might be a mistake.
Amp modelers rely heavily on tube amp manufacture for them to exist in the long run. If tube amp manufacturers will stop producing new amps, amp modelers won't have anything to model. So it's like a parasitic relationship.
Amps are dinosaurs, soon to be museum pieces. AI audio engineering will produce flawless 3D sound environments for live shows. We will soon laugh about back in the day when we took heavy, hard to maintain, one-directional amps monitors on stage. 10 to 20 years, gone.
None of anyone's sound is going to mean a thing if anyone can get any sound they want at a click of a button. It used to be sweet to go to shows and see what gear people had. Now it's just an amp modeling board. Yawn.
Tube amps, a thing of the past. Embrace digital. The future awaits.
I can't imagine opinions further apart. I like going to shows and seeing what the artists are using. I love the gear, and unfortunately today, a lot of artists are just using modelers and you don't see anything, maybe a couple of speakers on stage, and that's about it. So I do miss that, and I do appreciate artists that are still using real gear, or physical gear, I should say. But on the other hand, people who are really embracing digital technology are having visions of what live music can be going forward. And that's actually kind of interesting. I mean, that classic image of a rock show with a wall of amps, that's what I dreamed about. But maybe modern players are seeing that differently. I mean, innovation is certainly influencing people, and it'll be very interesting to see how this all evolves.
The main issue with tube amps is initial cost in most cases for home users. Your JCM 900 at home requires an attenuator, so buying that amp today is going to cost you, for discussion's sake, $1,000. You have to add a good attenuator, so $500 more. You cannot play with headphones even after all that money. This is today's reality. A 100-watt tube amp in an apartment is just stupid. For $500, you have a decent modeler that does it all.
How is it more affordable? The FM9 is $2,000. Then you need a power amp and a cab just to be able to approximate a tube amp so that you can jam in your room without being connected to your computer?
Very, very good point. Because the idea that modelers are less expensive than amplifiers, it really comes down to what you need them for. And that's something to consider when you're purchasing your gear, because everybody's needs are going to be different.
Tech hater. Seems you don't like new stuff. I'd like to keep up with what the market has to offer. We always want the best tone.
No matter how good modelers get, they will never be able to emit the smell of cooking vacuum tubes. If you know, you know.
Well, I can't argue with that guy, so I'm going to leave it right there. Well, at the very least, I think that was a healthy discussion. Now, depending on what side of the fence you are, I think we can all agree we're doing this because we love the guitar, and this is all about the guitar. We need more guitar in popular music, and I will say, as someone who's grown up as a traditional amp guy, products like these modelers, and especially the budget variety, are reaching out to more potential guitar players. Not everyone can play a real tube amp. Not everyone has the luxury of acquiring one or lives in a place where they can actually crank it up. So I get it. That's a very foreign concept to many people. But we're all behind the idea that we want more guitar in popular music. And for that to happen, we need more and more people playing guitar. And that's definitely something that modelers are doing. They're creating opportunity for more guitar players to experience those sounds that they might not have experienced otherwise. But I have to say, I think the guitar world is best served with real amplifiers in it. There's a relationship between a guitar and an amplifier that can never be replicated by a digital substitution. It just can't. And if you're a guitar player, I really believe that you got to try and play through an amp at some point. I like shaping my own sounds. I like leveraging technology because it just improves the workflow here and just adds more and more features and just makes everything better. And I really believe the two work really well together. And I think that's the amazing thing about being a guitar player today, is that we have so much choice. And it's just so much fun to be able to discover all the gear that we have at our disposal. It's probably the best time in history to be a guitar player. And I hope we can all agree about that. Anyways, if you missed the first video, and we'll call it in this series, I'm going to leave it right here. Make sure to check it out, because I think that was a really great discussion. At least it started all of this. So definitely check it out. Do like and subscribe, because I've got a lot more content coming, especially related around amps and modelers, how they work together, all sorts of different topics. That's all coming up soon. And remember, you don't need a band to rock and roll, and I'll catch you in the next one.